Off with you. Talk to me. Hey, good. Here there. Watch your back.
I need to get closer.
You got my attention. Off with you. What's on your mind? Watch your back.
That spell isn't. I'm out of mana. It's still charging.
Goes to help the drunk before then. In that case, you win.
Cut the crap, okay? I could easily snap your neck right here.
If you do that, then you won't get to hear my explanation for all this.
Good.
Play this game with me and I'll give you the answer to your question.
And if I win, then I'll kill you without a second thought.
What will you bet on it with then?
Anything. Doesn't matter, you might as well take everything I have. So then, who are you?
I earn a living lending out money.
You give money to people for a living? And you get rich doing it?
Money. You know what making money is like. It's not simple to do.
So then, was any of what you said true? Or was it all just a lie? Oil Lam. Is that even your real name, huh?
It is. Yes, that's real. Oh, Irnam. That tumor's also real. And it's also gotten larger, too. That's true. And the house I used to live with my family in was almost exactly like that one in the alley. That's all true. Can you still trust anybody to be good? Even after everything you've been through?
Why did you send the card?
I heard that. All the money you want is just sitting there. And that you are still living like you used to.
You got my attention.
Hi.
Is it all just because you feel guilty?
How are you?
Elroy, talk to me.
Count, shut up.
Off with you.
You don't feel any guilt for what you did, do you?
It's yours now. That cash is your reward for your hard work and luck. And you have every right to use it now. Life goes by quick. Here 1 minute. Gone in a blink.
Why did you do something like this?
Do you know what someone who doesn't have any money has in common with someone with too much money to know what to do with? Living is no fun for either of them. If you have too much money, then it doesn't matter what you buy or eat or drink or whatever. Everything. Well, it all gets boring. All of my clients started to eventually say the exact same things whenever we talked. Everybody felt that there was no joy in their lives anymore. And so, we decided to get together. We did a little bit of thinking. What could we all do to finally have some fun?
Some fun? You put us through all of that so you could have fun?
It seems that you forgot how no one had to play and you all put your signatures on the agreement. And that you all made your decision to come back on your own. Well, he's still out there. It looks like you've run out of luck. Tell me, you'll still trust in humanity being good?
I want to know. I want to know why you joined us.
Oh, well, in my childhood, I always had so much fun out doing things with all of my friends. We'd lose track of time for hours. I wanted to just feel something just one last time before I die. And you're not going to get that feeling if you're just going to spectate. And I desperately wanted that.
And so, did playing do that then?
Earlier, you asked why I let you live by joining and playing with you. I got that chance to feel again. Thanks to you, I got to remember all these things that I had forgotten long ago. It had been such a long time since I was able to have that much fun.
No. Keep your feet on the ground. Pray to me. Be good.
Look at that. There's someone who cares.
I can't put that there.
You need something?
You saw that, didn't you? You saw that you lost.
And our guests, greet them for me, all right?
Of course, sir, but why not do it yourself?
Because I know that I'm not going to have as much fun watching as playing.
How are you? Have a good Greetings.
The country's reported household debt is rapidly on the rise, topping the current global average. Last third quarter, the Bank of Korea and the Bank for International Settlements reported that the GDP to household
Holy moly, your hair sure grew out. What you getting done today? Did you want a shorter cut or keep it longer so we can perm it like that, huh?
pulled by the Bank for International Settlements, the biggest increase in the world besides China. The reason for the steep rise in Korea's reported household debt is due, in part, to the lifted government restrictions on financial loans.
Like with you.
You must be Cho. The family resemblance is there.
Sir, do you know my sister very well?
I know her. We're good friends.
Does that mean you know where she is right now?
Is this the boy?
Yeah.
Tell me your name, sweetie.
It's Cho. Kang Cho.
Gang Cho? How cool. That's a manly name you have there. And you look so tough and strong.
Take care of them, please.
Okay. It'll be nice to have a little extra company around for dinner for a change. Don't worry about me. Have a good trip.
Thanks.
Chol, have you had dinner yet? Here, come. Come and take a seat. Come on now. Have a fish bun. Here you go. Oh, goodness, that jacket's way too light for this cold. Wait, don't you have a warmer jacket?
help? Light bless you. Greetings. For the Alliance.
Too far away. Still recharging. I need to get closer. Too far away. I need to get closer. That spell is still recharging. I'm out of range. Can't cast that. Too far away. Can't cross that yet. I'm out of range. Too far away. My mana is low. I'm out of range. Charging.
What can I do for you? See you later.
Farewell. Light be with you. Kiyun! Kiyun!
You have arrived at Incheon Airport Terminal 1. This is Incheon Airport Terminal 1.
Hey, Daddy's almost at the airport now. I'll be boarding the flight soon. Of course I got you a present. No way, it's a secret. I'll show it to you in person. Hold on, Kyan. Kyan, I'm gonna call you back once I get there, okay? I'll be there soon, honey.
Let's play again. Right now. What the hell are you doing? Give me back
back that card!
No, you don't. You don't go!
This is the final boarding call for UA Airlines. Boarding for UA Flight 202 to Los Angeles will close shortly. All passengers bound for Los Angeles, please make your way to Gate 22 immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final boarding call.
Too far away. Can't pass that yet. I'm out of range.
Do you wish to participate in the game? If you wish to play, please state your name and date of birth.
Song-Ki-Yu. October 31st, 1974. Listen carefully. I'm not a horse. I'm a person. That's why I want to know who you people are. And how you can do these horrible things to people.
Mayor 456. Don't get any absurd ideas.
It wasn't a dream. I can't forgive you for everything you're doing.
Just get on that plane. It's for your own good.
I can't attack you.
Don't be afraid to dream big. Doesn't matter where you come from. You can show the world nothing is impossible.
Charging.
There are only 14 mountains in the world higher than 8,000 meters. The quest to climb these mountains is a story that goes back 100 years.
I'm out of range.
Above 8,000 meters in the death zone. It's a very high stakes game. The cold, wind, avalanches, when a climber gets into trouble, without other strong climbers around them to help, they're usually left to die.
In the history of high-altitude mountaineering, there is no one respected more than Reinhold Messner. He was the first climber to summit all the 14 8,000-meter peaks. It took him 16 years.
Fear is always in you. You have the feeling I am only safe if I'm back in base camp, back in civilization. Climbing all the 8,000-meter peaks in one lifetime is very hard.
Normally for a single 8,000er, it's a major endeavor. It's a huge 2-month expedition just to climb one 8,000-meter peak. But sometime in the spring of 2019, the mountaineering world started talking about this crazy guy from Nepal. He was someone that nobody'd ever heard of. Everyone was asking, who the hell is Nims Purja?
All right, Mike. The fastest time to climb all the 14 8,000-meter peaks was 7 years. If I can stay alive, I can do this in 7 months. This is about inspiring the human race. The climbing community of Nepal have always been the pioneers of 8,000ers, but they never got the respect they deserve. I want to represent the Nepalese climbing community. My mission was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 would be in Nepal. I would need to be the first climber in history to summit 6 8,000-meter peaks in the spring season. Phase 2 would be in Pakistan, where I would need to summit K2, and you got to be lucky to survive that mountain. And for phase 3, I would need to get permission from the Chinese government to climb in Tibet. I was told that my plan was impossible. So I decided to name it Project Possible.
Idea. But it wasn't a surprise to me.
I'm out of range.
He's constantly thinking. He's constantly thinking of something, I don't know what, but his brain doesn't rest at all.
We got married when we were very young. For her to let me go and do this huge project. Suchi is an amazing human. She is mentally super strong.
Well, I understood the risk, but I think it was in his character. He's very driven.
Inventory is...
Finally.
Yeah, finally been good. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Hey, just you look after yourself.
It was so dangerous, but I knew it was going to be life-changing for him.
King's honor, friend. Go with honor, friend.
On this project,
I will be supported by a team of Nepalese climbers who would climb with me on different mountains throughout the expedition.
Greetings.
I have to trust these guys with my life. But I also knew that it was gonna be fun.
Good morning, everybody, guys. Project Possible team.
Migma is the strongest climber I have ever met.
My right-hand man. Okay.
मलाई माउन्टेनियरिङ भनेको चाहिँ नयाँ कुराको एउटा एक्सप्लोर गर्नु हो जस्तो लाग्छ.
Galden is the best dancer on the planet.
दाजुभाइ जस्तो कि एउटा टिममा हैन सबैजना मिल्ने खाने अब अलिअलि खाना पनि बारेर खाने पार्टी सारी जाँदैन सँगै जाने.
Lakpa Dendi, he can carry the size of a house.
टिम वर्क मिल्यो भने सक्छ भन्ने बुझ्नै थियो, होप नै थियो पहिले नै मलाई चाहिँ. अब यो त अब नेपालकै लागि हो नि त राम्रो कुरा.
It's my brother Gisman. Hey.
Gisman, he is willing to put everything on the line.
प्रोजेक्ट पसिबल त त्यस्तो अब गरेको कसैले थिएन. हैन जानुपर्छ.
The established way of behaving in mountaineering is to be very humble and to understate one's goals. Nims is very much the opposite. He's very outspoken.
This is me. I got abdomen, but this gonna go away, you know?
When he told me about Project Possible, it was just mind-boggling. You're dealing with weather windows, the logistics, the route conditions. That's extremely dangerous. I thought great ambition here, but not likely to succeed at all.
Sometimes you got to focus on something that's very important to you. I'll make this happen. And it's gonna go away for sure. Boom. Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many times you've been there and how many times you've seen it, your mind just can't comprehend how big Annapurna is. It gives you this sense of going to battle and you're gonna fight something pretty mean. For every 3 climbers that make it to the summit, 1 dies trying.
Galden Sherpa, I'm going to summit Annapurna. Hello, I'm being my David Sherpa. निम्स दाइको बारेमा मैले मेरो मामाकोबाट सुनेको थिएँ. उहाँको पहिलो पिक लबुचे पिक मेरो मामासँगै क्लाइम्बिङ गर्नुभएको रहेछ. मैले निम्स दाइलाई दाइ म तपाईलाई आफ्नै दाइ जस्तै गरी मद्दत गर्छु भनेको थिएँ. अनि यो प्रोजेक्टको लागि मैले मेरो तर्फबाट जे दिन सक्छु दिन्छु पनि भनेको थिएँ.
I was leading the fixing team. You set the ropes, opening the route for others.
This is what it takes to set fixed lines. See how tired is my brother, you know? And see the sun. It's been a struggle today. Done, my brother.
I was on Annapurna at the same time as Nims.
This is my friend Don, trying to trailblaze on
6 feet deep snow?
I've made 5 different attempts over 13 years to try to make it to the top of this mountain and haven't been able to do it. There is no other climb that I've ever been on where the mountain is literally crumbling down on top of you. It's terrifying.
Need help? Go with honor, Fred.
You feel like you have no control.
Just in time. Well, that's just off our shoulders.
Careful.
वेदरको हिसाबले हेर्दाखेरि एकदमै राम्रो नै थियो तर नयाँ हिमपातको कारणले गर्दाखेरि एकदमै कठिन भइरहेको थियो
Super deep. Somewhere is was deep.
नयाँ हिमपातपछि हिउँ पहिरो जाने जोखिम उच्च नै हुन्छ
That was super tough. There was a point where I gave up. And I just said, Nims, this is not going to work.
Giving up is not in the blood, sir. It's not in the blood.
That was the first daylight for me about his project. This guy believed that they were going to do it, and they pushed through.
Yes. See that, man.
Couldn't be prouder of this guy. Every time I was like, hey man, things don't look like they're gonna go through on this Burn climb. He's like, I believe. Here we are standing on the summit.
Thank you so much.
Love that.
I'll be back with the team today. It's a lot. Yes. Look at that view.
I was so happy at the summit. I was like, well, Nims, the clock starts now.
We came down from the summit, got to Camp 4, and slept that night. In the morning, Nims poked his head inside the tent. He said, we got a problem. There's a climber from a different team. He didn't come down in the night. He's still up there. There was a helicopter that was flying in to see where he was. This is really morbid thing to say. We were hoping he had passed in the night. To consider that he had survived that long at that altitude and without oxygen was a pretty horrific thought. He waved as we went by. I just started to cry.
I thought, you know what, if that was me, he was just gonna die in hope. So we made the decision that we had to help. Who's gonna be on the rescue team? Me, Migma, Gisman, and Galzen.
It's almost on the margins of the helicopter swing.
हिमालयस माउन्टेनियरिङ सेक्टरमा लागेको 10 वर्ष बितिसकेको छ। 100 भन्दा बढी यसको मिसनमा पनि संलग्न भइसकेको छु।
सम्भवै कस्तो होइन नभएको चाहिँ जिउ पुरै थाकेको थियो, एनर्जी नै थियो। यस्तो डर लाग्दो हुन्छ नि, डर लाग्दो ल के हो नि होला होइन, माथिबाट कसरी झार्ने होला, कसरी के गर्छ भने अलिकति कस्तो डर फिल भएको थियो।
Bravery doesn't even remotely describe what those guys had to do to go back up. You finally summit one of the most dangerous mountains in the world, and now you gotta go back up there? It is a roll of the dice.
I'm out of range. Too far away. I need to target something first. I'm out of range. Still recharging. Spell isn't over yet. Carry anymore. I need to get closer. Can't cast that yet. Too far away. Let's start recharging. Can't cast that yet. Inventory is full. Carry anymore.
Well met. Careful.
Hello. Have a good one.
Too far away.
King's honor, friend. For the Alliance. Light be with you. Go with honor, friend. Need help?
What can I do for you? See you around.
The American nation cannot, must not, and will not permit the establishment of another communist government.
This is called a Cavendish banana. It's the most common banana on Earth. It's probably the one that you have in your kitchen right now. It's definitely the one you see in the grocery store. This banana was created in a fancy-looking house in England. Yes, created, and yes, in England. Kind of weird. Bananas aren't from England. They're originally from Asia. And there are thousands of different kinds of bananas. So how did this banana, the Cavendish, that was created in England, become the banana that you eat today? Well, the answer to that is not so simple. You have to understand the story of bananas, which, yes, is something we're diving into today. It's a story filled with predatory corporations and geopolitics and American imperialism and disease and really some amazing marketing. It explains how corporations can grow so big that they begin to act like governments, like dictators. And it explains why this banana, the Cavendish, the one you know and love, might not exist soon.
The world's most popular banana may be on the verge of extinction.
Oh, and while I was diving deep into this, I discovered that there's a better tasting banana out there. One that isn't supposed to exist anymore, but I got my hands on some. And yes, they're better. So, buckle up. This is the effed up history of bananas. We're pausing this story really quick because I just need to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Stamps.com, a service that I have used for now several years, long before they came to sponsor videos, so it's kind of cool. A few years ago, I became independent, which meant I had to start running my own business. I quickly realized that running a business means shipping things a lot. I was shipping hard drives with footage, I was shipping gear and lenses. I was going to the post office a bunch, which is kind of my nightmare. So I Googled, like, what's the best way to not go to the free 1800s? And you have the World's Fair, where all the people show up and show off their new technology. At the fair, you've got this guy, Alexander Graham Bell, who's showing up with his cute little new invention that's about to change the world. But another crowd favorite at the expo was the banana. Yes, bananas were equally as impressive as the telephone at the World's Fair. The banana business started booming in the United States, much of these bananas flowing in from New York City. The port there was dubbed Banana Docks for a while because of so much fruit import. So now you have all these Americans eating this sweet, creamy, delicious fruit and throwing the slippery peels onto the street. It got so bad that the police commissioner at the time, oh God, I can't get away from this guy, Teddy Roosevelt. Once again, I swear, I get into any story, I like start to research it, and it's like, yeah, and then there's American imperialism, and it's like Teddy Roosevelt, like, shows up. Anyway, so Teddy Roosevelt, the police commissioner, starts putting a fine on people for throwing their banana peels on the sidewalk. Like, this isn't just like a silly, fake joke. It's like, this is a real thing. People slipped on banana peels.
Patrick, banana peel! Don't!
What did you say?
And you could go to jail for it. I mean, look at this. There's this New York Times article documenting Teddy Roosevelt, the police commissioner, speaking to a room of police captains, explaining, quote, the bad habits of banana skins, and dwelling particularly on its tendency to toss people into the air and bring them down with terrific force on the hard pavement. This was a real issue. Okay. Banana Docks, Teddy Roosevelt, slippery banana peels, silly newspaper articles from the late 1800s. This isn't the story here. We're just getting started. This is like bananas' like innocent phase. It's about to heat up. Let's see how bananas turned from this to this. The banana business people in the US realized it was time to ramp up to meet all of this new demand. But instead of just importing more bananas from, say, Jamaica or other countries in the Caribbean, the banana companies realized that they needed to control the supply chain. Let me explain what I mean by a second by looking at this banana. Bananas are fragile. They're soft. They spoil in like a week. Like this one's like moments away from spoiling. Look at those spots. To get this thing from somewhere close to the equator all the way to New York City and then into someone's market and then into somebody's home, all without it being crushed and without it spoiling, is a fragile, quick, expensive process. And the only way to do it profitably is to do a lot of it. A lot of bananas. And the only way to do a lot of bananas is to control the supply chain. So it's like 1900 at this point. There's a banana gold rush happening. There's a bunch of companies trying to figure out how to control the supply chain. And then they decide to sort of merge together and become this one super company called the United Fruit Company. And their plan for combining was to control everything, control the supply chain. They turned their attention completely to Central America, where they know bananas could grow abundantly and where, oh, look at this, the US is thinking about making a little canal that cuts through this little narrow strip of land. So the United Fruit Company is like, that's kind of a nice perk for the region. If anything goes wrong, the US could have our backs. Foreshadowing. Am I foreshadowing? I'm foreshadowing. So yeah, United Fruit Company's like, this region, Central America, looks like a great neighborhood to control the supply chain. They wanted to control the people who worked on the farm by owning their basic survival needs. They wanted to control the houses they lived in and the stores they shopped in and what they could buy. They wanted to control the transportation by building railways so that they could quickly ship their product onto ports. They wanted to control the boats and the waterways so that they could get all of these bananas from Central America to the US before they spoiled. They started with Guatemala, pouring tons of investment into controlling every inch of their supply chain. Soon, they were the largest company in Guatemala. They owned a fifth of the farmable land in the country. They owned all of the railways and all of the radio stations and radio infrastructure. And by 1901, the government of Guatemala actually hired the United Fruit Company to manage the country's postal service. What? United Fruit was starting to look a lot like a government, and the result was a lot of happy banana-eating Americans. So they kept going. They kept expanding their operations across Central America. So now with all of this beautiful infrastructure and trains and land, the next strategy for making bananas even more profitable was, you guessed it, paying the workers next to nothing. Oh, and paying them not with real money. A lot of the times, United Fruit paid their workers in vouchers. These vouchers could only be used in designated United Fruit commissaries. So they're not actually making real money here. So wait, now the United Fruit Company has its own currency? Oh, and they also had like a private navy. 93 boats called the Great White Fleet. But then eventually they started using these boats to like transport people on cruises. These boats were even used during World War II. United Fruit started to look like a literal government. They had their hands in everything, so much so that they earned theirself the nickname El Pulpo, which means the octopus in Spanish, meaning they had their tentacles in everything all over Central America. The land, the crops, the people, the infrastructure, and soon enough, government agencies. Soon these countries became so dominated by and reliant on the United Fruit Company that they were no longer run by the people or the governments. They were run by American banana companies who had all the power and leverage in the world. This led to the nickname Banana Republic, which is a politically unstable country whose society is exploited for profit for one single product. In this case, bananas. Yeah, and probably not the best sort of thing to name your clothing store after. Like, just a thought, but like, who made that decision? United Fruit and other banana companies continued to grow and control Central America. Eventually, people got tired of this. In 1911, Honduras was like, all right, we're done, banana companies. Like, we're gonna take back our land. We can take it from here. These are our plantations. You've gone too far. Banana companies didn't like this. So they organized a private army to help overthrow the government so that they could put in a president that they liked, who would allow them to keep doing exactly what they were doing and also give them a tax break. So yeah, banana companies are now overthrowing governments. Jeez. This kept happening. Anytime there was political dissent or the governments of these countries started to like step up and say like no, the banana companies would intervene. And guess who had their back? The US military. And yes, we're back to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. What a guy. Here's Teddy stomping around the Caribbean with his big stick, making sure that American military and business interests are protected. In Honduras alone, the US invaded 7 times in the early 1900s, all in the name of protecting these banana companies and other US interests from having to face these pesky locals who were so audacious as to want to run their own country. How dare they? You have to remember that at this time, the US was starting to get really comfortable with empire behavior. And Central America was at the top of the priority list. The banana companies knew this, which allowed them to feel emboldened to just sort of do whatever they wanted in the region. Okay, but this is sort of child's play. It started to get a lot worse in the 1920s. There was a situation in Colombia where a bunch of workers for the United Fruit Company decided to stop working and protest their working conditions. They were asking for a few things like, I don't know, working 6 days a week instead of 7, or getting paid real money. The United Fruit Company refuses to negotiate with them and instead goes to the US and says, hey, USA, we've got these really annoying workers who are like trying to unionize and trying to get paid and stuff. And it actually smells a lot like communism. And the US is like, wait, what, communism? Tell me more. So then the US threatens to invade with their Marines and squash this strike if the Colombian military doesn't do something first. Reminder that we're not talking about some big political revolution or rebellion. We're talking about a few workers in a banana plantation protesting for more humane conditions. And yet, this was a priority for the US government to put pressure on Colombia to fix the situation. Of course, Colombia didn't want to make the US angry, so they responded and sent in their own troops to go put down this workers' strike. And they were ordered to, quote, spare no ammunition. So on December 5th, 1928, these protesters are in the town square in this town in Colombia, and the Colombian army shows up and massacres them. Men, women, and children were killed by their own military, all because an American banana company didn't want to pay them a decent wage. I mean, this is madness. It is madness to think that these large geopolitical forces were coming to bear over a banana plantation. This event is called the Banana Massacre. This didn't stop in 1928. Fast forward to Guatemala in the 1950s. At this point, the United Fruit Company, El Pulpo, is making major profits. They own almost 50% of the land in Guatemala, tax-free. But this president, Jacobo Arbenz, who was democratically elected, is trying to change things. He wants to take land that United Fruit owns but isn't using and redistribute it to poor Guatemalans. He's sort of doing like a Robin Hood thing, trying to like lift poor Guatemalans out of poverty. But of course, United Fruit didn't like this. But instead of engaging directly with the Guatemalan government, United Fruit goes to the White House and says those magic words again, communism. United Fruit then hired this PR magician, who happened to be Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he worked with news agencies to create a bunch of fake stories that linked Arbenz, the president of Guatemala, to communism. Completely fake news. And not just like using that word lightly, like he created a fake Guatemalan newspaper, created all these fake reports, and then distributed those fake newspapers to Congress. He planted the seeds in their minds that the United Fruit Company were the good guys, and that Arbenz, the democratically elected leader, needed to go because of communism. It totally worked. President Eisenhower, the president of the United States, believed all of this. And he sent in the CIA to get Arbenz out of power, to protect the banana people once again. So it's a classic CIA coup. They go find a bunch of rebels, they give them money, and they train them.
Rebels rose to oust Guatemala's red infiltrated government.
They find a leader who wants to be the next president that's friendly to the US, and eventually they start broadcasting anti-government propaganda, and they turn Guatemalans against their government with all of this fake news and propaganda. They send the Navy in to block Guatemalan waters, they send some bombs onto Guatemala City, and then they invade. And then with the these trained fighters, they go take over the government, the Guatemalan army surrenders, and the leader of the rebels becomes the new president, friendly to the United States. Now the banana companies are happy, and they have a guy in power that is their guy. They have a playbook on how to like mess with democracies around the world, and they just sort of followed the playbook. They're like, oh, we've done this before. We're gonna do it again in Iran in a little bit. Like, this is like classic CIA coup. By the way, this coup was sort of a death blow to democracy in Guatemala. It divided and destroyed the budding civil society that has not allowed Guatemala to recover since. All because these banana companies wanted to control the supply chain. These things leave scars, major marks on a country, scars that are still felt today. Okay, let's switch gears for a second, because all of this sort of banana like coups and banana republics and massacres is like horrendous. But during all of this violence and military invasions and human rights violations, all of this meant that the United Fruit Company was getting really, really good at their business. They were sending too many bananas to the United States. There was a ton of banana supply, but demand wasn't rising fast enough. The average American didn't totally know how to use bananas. So the United Fruit Company creates this amazing marketing campaign. So now they're paying doctors to write amazing academic journal articles about bananas. They cut a deal with Kellogg's to like market the cereal as something that pairs with bananas, which is something I still do today. I cut up my bananas and I put them in my cereal because of this campaign. They targeted moms with small children. They made recipe books. They even created a guide on how to decorate with bananas.
Bananas can be served in many different and many attractive ways. Blended with fruits, nuts, and gelatins, they provide high food value and nourishment.
But their biggest success was Miss Chiquita.
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I've come to say bananas have to ripen in a certain way, and when they're flecked with brown and have a golden hue, bananas taste the best and are the best for you.
The American public fell in love with this lady and bananas. They had no idea that these bananas were being produced and shipped and bought with blood. They just liked how they taste. But isn't that the case with a lot of things that we all consume every day? But there's one thing that US imperialism and millions of dollars of marketing cannot control, which is disease. This is the part of the story that I tell you that the bananas that were all the rage during the 1900s are not the bananas that you're eating today. Part of United Fruit Company's efforts to control everything was standardizing the genetics of the banana, making them all exactly the same. Monocultures is what we call that. The problem with monocultures is that they're like heaven for a disease, because you don't have to solve the same puzzle to infect another banana. If you infect one, you infect them all. And that's exactly what happened. Panama disease was a fungus that came in and destroyed banana plantations. The banana supply in the US shrank rapidly, and there was even a hit song about the banana shortage.
We have no bananas today.
The banana that they had been using, the one that was getting really popular in the US, was called the Gros Michel, or the Big Mike banana. But it was now completely getting ravaged by disease. So these banana companies are freaking out. They're like, we are done. Like, we've built this entire empire, and this disease is gonna wipe us out. So they started to scramble to find another banana. It turns out there's like 1,000 types of bananas out there. There's like red ones and blue ones and like teal ones. I mean, a blue banana. I feel like I have to eat a blue banana at some point in my life. But here's the problem. Us Americans, we buy our food kind of with our eyes first. We're just like, it needs to look good. And so these companies realized that they couldn't send a blue banana to the United States. They needed a banana that looked similar. Yellow, sweet, and seedless, so that they could keep selling to Americans who hopefully wouldn't notice the switch. Enter our friend, the Cavendish banana. Like I said in the beginning, this banana was invented by a British guy who was tinkering with banana seeds in this amazing looking house in northern England. And after years of playing around with the genetics, the plant finally flowered and popped out this big, beautiful yellow banana. And so he named it after the Duke, William Cavendish. So now here's the sad part. The Gros Michel, the one that had caught on that was like the big hit in America, was a way better banana, is a way better banana. It is sweeter, it's more durable, and it's just overall a better banana compared to the Cavendish. In fact, the artificial banana flavor that we have in our candies, like Laffy Taffy, comes from the original Gros Michel, not from the Cavendish. But the Gros Michel was getting destroyed by this disease, and the Cavendish was luckily resistant to the disease. So the dictator banana companies made the switch and hoped that the people wouldn't care or notice as long as they looked the same. And guess what? It totally worked. They quietly switched out the banana to the new Cavendish, and people just kept buying bananas. I mean, I can't believe that there is a better banana out there that I have not tasted. I wonder if I can get my hands on one. Bananas. The Gros Michel banana still exists. It's just a select few people on this planet still grow it, and I found a farm that sent me a few. I'm gonna try this thing. Gros Michel, let's do this. What a beautiful banana. Wow. I mean, I'm obviously primed to like this more, so I don't know if I'm really liking it more, but it's definitely a better banana right now in my mind. Slightly different color. It's got this like burgundy vibe going on. It's sweeter. I like the texture more. I think this is a better banana. Too bad this thing got completely wiped out by a disease. Okay, so let's get up to speed before we finish this story off, because the last part of it is quite interesting and applies to our modern day. To summarize, bananas came to the US, predatory companies invaded whole countries to help the US exploit them for bananas while using amazing marketing to keep demand up. And because of this Panama disease, they had to switch to the inferior Cavendish banana. So where do we go from here? United Fruit eventually rebranded to Chiquita. They're still doing some pretty shady stuff, like paying millions of dollars to terrorist death squads and getting sued by workers who've become sterile after handling pesticides. Banana companies will probably always do this. Because the other thing that remains is that bananas are still soft and spoil quickly and grow in faraway places from where you eat them. So the entire supply chain needs to be controlled. And the other thing that hasn't changed is that the new banana is genetically optimized so that every banana is exactly the same, so it fits perfectly into these boxes, into these crates, onto these ships, into these supermarkets. But guess what? There's another disease. The Panama disease, the one that wiped out the Gros Michel, it's back, and it's mutated, and it's coming for the Cavendish. And what's tricky about these diseases is there's no way to detect them before they arrive, before it's too late. It just quietly kills the banana trees and makes it impossible to ever grow there again. You have to burn the entire plantation. This is already happening. In the Philippines, which is the second largest exporter of bananas, the disease has devastated the land and the banana economy. It's making its way through Asia. Okay, but Asia's like super far away, and it's like there's a whole ocean in between. It's like all our bananas come from Latin America. Wrong. In 2019, it was detected in Colombia. And in April of this year, just a few months ago, the disease was found in Peru, right next to Ecuador, which is the largest exporter of bananas that come to the US. It's coming for your bananas. So everyone's on high alert. And bananas, as we know them, might be doomed. So now we're seeing history kind of repeat itself. We're looking at the potential collapse of a $25 billion industry and entire economies, which is like hundreds of thousands of jobs. To me, the big problem here, the thing that's repeating itself, is the same problem of United Fruit Company going in, trying to control every angle of their production to maximize profits. When we have companies that feel emboldened to do whatever it takes to make the most profit, you're gonna get situations like this, whether it is banana massacres in Colombia, or a coup in Honduras, or a monoculture that gets wiped out by disease time and time again. We try to engineer our way out of these problems, and we sometimes do, but at the end of the day, nature will catch up with us. And as long as we ignore the true costs of these economies, the cost to people, to democracies, to ecologies, we're never actually going to get rid of these problems. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm gonna eat a Cavendish now.
Well met. Go with honor, friend.
See ya.
Pleased to meet you. See you soon.
I have the finest wires in the land. Safe travel. Interest you on the pint? What's your back?
Welcome. Watch your back.
I don't need to tell you. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that. Charging. Can't cast that yet.
Great to meet you. Off with you.
What's on your mind? Safe travels. What can I do for you? Off with you.
Can't that here. the target. Let's go.
How are ya?
Watch your back.
Great to meet you. See you soon.
You got my attention.
The farm that sent me a few. I'm gonna try this thing. Gros Michel, let's do this. What a beautiful banana. Wow. I mean, I'm obviously primed to like this more, so I don't know if I'm really liking it more, but it's definitely a better banana right now in my mind. Slightly different color. It's got this like burgundy vibe going on. It's sweeter. I like the texture more. I think this is a better banana. Too bad this thing got completely wiped out by a disease. Okay, so let's get up to speed before we finish this story off, because the last part of it is quite interesting and applies to our modern day. To summarize, bananas came to the US, predatory companies invaded whole countries to help the US exploit them for bananas while using amazing marketing to keep demand up. And because of this Panama disease, they had to switch to the inferior Cavendish banana. So where do we go from here? United Fruit eventually rebranded to Chiquita. They're still doing some pretty shady stuff, like paying millions of dollars to terrorist death squads and getting sued by workers who've become sterile after handling pesticides. Banana companies will probably always do this. Because the other thing that remains is that bananas are still soft and spoil quickly and grow in faraway places from where you eat them. So the entire supply chain needs to be controlled. And the other thing that hasn't changed is that the new banana is genetically optimized so that every banana is exactly the same. So it fits perfectly into these boxes, into these crates, onto these ships, into these supermarkets. But guess what? There's another disease. The Panama disease, the one that wiped out the Gros Michel, it's back. And it's mutated and it's coming for the Cavendish. And what's tricky about these diseases is there's no way to detect them before they arrive, before it's too late. It just quietly kills the banana trees and makes it impossible to ever grow there again. You have to burn the entire plantation. This is already happening. In the Philippines, which is the second largest exporter of bananas, the disease has devastated the land and the banana economy. It's making its way through Asia. Okay, but Asia's like super far away, and it's like there's a whole ocean in between. It's like all our bananas come from Latin America. Wrong. In 2019, it was detected in Colombia. And in April of this year, just a few months ago, the disease was found in Peru, right next to Ecuador, which is the largest exporter of bananas that come to the US. It's coming for your bananas. So everyone's on high alert. And bananas, as we know them, might be doomed. So now we're seeing history kind of repeat itself. We're looking at the potential collapse of a $25 billion industry and entire economies, which is like hundreds of thousands of jobs. To me, the big problem here, the thing that's repeating itself, is the same problem of United Fruit Company going in, trying to control every angle of their production to maximize profits. When we have companies that feel emboldened to do whatever it takes to make the most profit, you're gonna get situations like this, whether it is banana massacres in Colombia, or a coup in Honduras, or a monoculture that gets wiped out by disease time and time again. We try to engineer our way out of these problems, and we sometimes do, but at the end of the day, nature will catch up with us. And as long as we ignore the true costs of these economies, the cost to people, to democracies, to ecologies, we're never actually going to get rid of these problems. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm gonna eat a Cavendish now. See ya. I want you to see something. You ready? This is a giant map of Switzerland. I love Switzerland, and one thing I have learned about Switzerland is that the Swiss like to be neutral. This country does not like conflict. They avoid it at all costs, which is strange because they're really good at fighting. Other European countries used to hire Swiss men to fight their wars for them, but back home in Switzerland, they don't fight. They don't take sides. That's partly because they lost a few wars of expansion and kind of just decided it was probably better to just stay put. But it's also because back when Europe was full of empires, the big European powers thought it would be a good idea to have a mountainous, small buffer country in between some of the big rival powers. And so Switzerland was kind of deemed this neutral power. But the result is that today, Switzerland doesn't take sides. They don't send their troops to fight in other wars. They rarely join alliances. I mean, they're not a part of the EU, they're not a part of NATO, and they reluctantly barely joined the UN as recently as 2002, a decade after North Korea. And the only countries that joined after them didn't exist before then, meaning they came into existence after 2002, so they couldn't have joined before then. Switzerland is serious about neutrality. No conflict, no alliances, leave us alone.
When you're right here, right at the crossroads of people trying to take over Europe, staying out of conflict has big benefits for your country and its economy. But it also means staying neutral is really hard. But the Swiss have done it, using their mountains, some exceptional engineering, obsessive commitment, and a healthy amount of explosives. The Swiss have kept empires out of their country, sticking to their guns and staying neutral even when Europe was tearing itself apart.
So you're Switzerland in the 1940s. Here's your situation. You're surrounded by Nazi Germany to your north and fascist Italy to your south, and quickly are becoming engulfed with all the countries that are now in the sphere of influence of these countries. You're surrounded, and Hitler is winning everywhere, but you're Switzerland, and so you're like, don't invade us, we're not gonna fight, we're not taking sides, we'll just keep trading with whoever wants to trade with us, but we're not gonna fight or be invaded, and no. That's not how Europe was in the 1940s. You couldn't just sit it out. And yet, the Swiss were committed to doing so.
The fact is that even with this commitment to neutrality, an invasion from their next-door neighbor, the Third Reich, was a very real possibility.
So, Switzerland devised what I argue is just the most Swiss plan ever to stay neutral during World War II and future global conflicts. It's a plan that still lives on today that you can still see when you go to Switzerland. Here's what it looks like.
First up, they looked around their country at any linkages to the outside. They chose key points around the country that would give invading armies access to the country, like roads, bridges, tunnels, any access point. And then they packed it full of explosives. Dynamite, TNT, whatever. Anything that would just completely destroy that linkage. They got really inventive with this stuff. Sometimes they would wire a bridge with dynamite, but they also would put secret cannons in mountains that would pop out and point at a major road and demolish it if needed, making it unusable. Or sometimes they would go to their long tunnels, like this 10-kilometer tunnel down here at the border with Italy, and they would rig it with TNT so that they could quickly seal off this part of their mountainous southern border. Up on mountain passes, they even rigged the sides of mountains with explosives to create artificial landslides to block the road. The thinking here is that if an invading army were marching into Switzerland, they could pull the trigger on all this stuff, igniting dynamite or shelling or otherwise destroying all the ways to get into the country, making it a lot harder to invade and giving them time to retreat to the mountains.
There's a wonderful, strange irony going on here. The Swiss are really good at transportation. The trains are immaculate and efficient and go up crazy mountains and are always on time.
Roam around the country and you'll see this. These are the little doors in the streets where they would pack explosives.
So it's kind of ironic that all of this infrastructure was packed with explosives. But I guess that makes it even more functional because now it's a defense mechanism in addition to being infrastructure for transportation. Oh, I love Switzerland.
There's this one bridge that connects Switzerland to Germany that was built in 2006. And when it was built, it was packed with explosives. This bridge was built in conjunction with Germany. Germany paved half of the bridge, and yet they didn't even know that it was rigged with explosives. It's very aggressive, Switzerland. Okay, so anyway, blowing up their borders and sealing themselves off was one major strategy for aggressively staying neutral. Let's get on to the next one.
At the same time, time, something that may be shaping the political landscape come
At exactly that time.
Yeah. Come election time
Yeah.
is whatever the Supreme Court decides to do about Roe versus Wade. So let's go ahead and throw this Vice tear sheet up on the screen. As you guys probably know, the court heard oral arguments last week about, it's a Mississippi case that was, I mean, it was intentionally engineered to get to the Supreme Court and challenge the legitimacy of Roe versus Wade. Effectively, most court watchers listening to the arguments felt very confident that it was likely Roe versus Wade was likely to be overturned. This particular legal scholar says 1,000,000% chance Roe v. Wade is overturned. 1 million, I can't emphasize that enough. Another individual analyst that Vice interviewed here pegged it at 70%. And this person, Jesse Hill, said that before they listened to oral arguments, they said about 40%, because the kind of reading of the court was they'll try to come up with some more compromised position that Roberts seems still to be reaching for around maybe where the viability is at 24 weeks. Maybe they move that back or change that standard. But after listening to the arguments, this watcher moved their percentage from 40% to 70%. There were a few things that really caught people's eyes. One of them was that Justice Kavanaugh rattled off a list of a bunch of cases where SCOTUS had overturned past settled precedent. Because this had always been the argument of like, this is precedent. You can't mess with this. We're talking about 40 years.
Stare decisis.
Yeah, we're talking about decades now where Roe versus Wade has been the law of the land. All of our sort of law, everything has been shaped around that precedent. So to go and overturn that, oftentimes the court is reluctant to do that. So the fact that Kavanaugh went out and rattled off this list of instances when precedents had been overturned and said, I have a quote from him, he says, if we think that the prior precedents are seriously wrong, if that, why then doesn't the history of this court's practice with respect to those cases tell us what the right answer is, that it's actually a return to the position of neutrality, code for basically states decide what they want to do, and not stick with those precedents in the same way that all those other cases didn't. Amy Coney Barrett also seemed to be very much, making arguments in favor of overturning Roe versus Wade. According to Vice here, the only conservative justice who didn't seem totally sold on overturning Roe was Justice Roberts, who now wildly is sort of a centrist voice on the court. He was repeatedly asking about the importance of the so-called viability line. Under past abortion jurisprudence, states are blocked from banning abortion ahead of fetal viability, the developmental benchmark at which fetuses are able to survive outside the womb. That typically occurs at around 24 weeks of pregnancy. That was kind of the direction that most people thought going in, that this would go in rather than a full overturning of Roe. Now that oral arguments have been had, it looks much more likely that they are going to actually get rid of Roe versus Wade.
Yes, and so it's interesting. Let's put that New York Times one up there on the screen. I actually encourage people to go and read it. We'll put the link in the description because it actually does a decent enough job of just quoting a bunch of people who have different opinions on this stuff, both from conservative professors, legal people arguing, look, Dred versus Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, all these other laws which have been overturned in the past. You don't necessarily have to stick to jurisprudence if you think it's bad jurisprudence. Others pointing to a much more politico-social view of the court and of the fact that there is plunging legitimacy found in the Supreme Court amongst Democrats over the last, I think, 20 years, but the last 10 years in particular, given that Trump was able to put 3 Supreme Court justices. The person most susceptible on the Republican side to that type of thinking is the Chief Justice, John Roberts. John Roberts' nightmare is packing the Supreme Court and any sort of judicial change to that. He's like, that is the thing I want to avoid the most. I want to die with 9 justices on the court, and I want it to have some sort of legitimacy within the American public. That's why he's been willing, with Obamacare, with DACA, with the census question, in many of these cases citing against Donald Trump or citing much more in the favor against necessarily where people thought he was going to stand, where towards trying to find some sort of balance in public opinion. What have we learned over the last 4 40 years in the abortion debate. I don't think there is much balance, unfortunately. For most people, it's just such one of those issues. It's like you're either for or against. And it seems to be one of these issues where he's going to find himself in a bind, especially, Crystal, because it's a 6-3 court. He's not the swing vote.
Nope.
You know, he could even dissent, and it wouldn't really matter. So with 5-4, then the question comes, how are they going to write that? Justice Gorsuch, obviously, is one who is actually on the wrong side of a lot of the social conservatives because of the way that he voted in the, I forget what the case was actually called, but it was about something about transgender sex equality in terms of how you interpret it with Title IX in the civil rights law, whether gender identity is included or not. That really, you know, put him on, I would say, the wrong side of a lot of the social cons who are within the movement. I also think it's important to note that the social conservatives, the people who are hardcore on abortion and on all this stuff within the Republican coalition, they're not actually the majority. It's probably 32, 33%, but it comes to the tyranny of the dictatorship of the small minority, point that I've brought up a lot about Nassim Taleb. These people, this is pretty much all they care about. Yeah. They will crawl over broken glass and have for the last 40 years, specifically to vote for this moment. And so if it doesn't happen, they're going to freak out. So this is one of those cases where, you know, even though 1/3 of the people who voted for Trump actually describe themselves as pro-choice, they rate it much less important on the spectrum than the people who, I believe it was only 3% of the entire American electorate cared about abortion as their #1 issue in the 2020 election, and something like 90% of them voted for Trump. As in, it was like, so again, you know, the people who are pro-choice, they may say, you know, they care, but on the list of priorities, very, very low. Could Roe versus Wade change all of that? We'll see. Our friend Rachel Bovard actually wrote this piece. She's, you know, a big social conservative. She's kind of a court watcher, and obviously we wanted to bring her analysis as well to the table. Let's put it up there on the screen from The Spectator. Cracks are showing in Roe versus Wade. What she points to is that a lot of the Republicans have been very skeptical of Justice Roberts and of Justice Gorsuch, so they were watching these oral arguments like a hawk. You should also put this on the table. A lot of this is tea leaves, trying to figure out where people stand. Clarence Thomas, I think, has spoken once in the last, 8 years on the bench, so it's not always the easiest thing. But what she's pointing to, and what a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing, is that they are saying it's very likely that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. Now, the timeline as to when that is going to happen, given the 6-3 and all of that, could potentially be right before the midterm elections. And that's where the question of the political stuff that people have to bet on comes to the fore. Will people actually vote and freak out if Roe versus Wade is overturned or not? There's two schools of thought. Actually, I'm curious what you think. What I hear from a lot of the people who are big social cons, they're like, look, they say they care, but not that many people actually freaked out in Texas. Yes, it was like a one-day story or whatever, but the people in Texas aren't going to come out and vote against Governor Abbott anytime soon. And a national repeal would certainly be big headlines, but come election time, then, you know, there's all this other stuff going on in the country that it won't galvanize like a Women's March level movement. For me personally, I think they're completely underrating how exactly when something has just been stasis for 40 years and then you take it away, I think that's going to change American politics forever. I could be completely wrong. I'm curious what you think, because this is how the social conservatives are justifying this, saying that, look, we're going to, basically we're going to have our cake and eat it too and not suffer any electoral consequences, because, I mean, look, you can look at the polling, 50-50, yes, kind of on how people feel abortion, but in terms of the first,
Roe,
I was going to say on Roe, it's actually much more like a 60-65, which they conveniently like to ignore whenever they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, people do feel complicated ways about abortion, which I actually really relate to. I think most
any
people do.
Human can.
Yeah, absolutely. But on Roe, 2/3 of the public thinks that Roe should stand.
Yeah.
So they're definitely not on the right side of majority opinion. There's a couple things that I think about this, and I'm kind of up in the air about exactly how this plays out politically and how it plays in the midterm elections, etc. But if I were to make the case that this will be a significant political event, there's two pieces. Number one, Republicans have used the social conservatives dangling this in front of them like a carrot for decades now.
Yeah.
I mean, how did Trump ultimately win?
Yeah, it's because of this.
It's because of this. a lot of social conservatives were nervous about him. And there were two things that sealed the deal. Number one, putting Pence on the ticket. And number two, releasing the list of this is who my Supreme Court justices are going to be. And he was much more,
he was more forward.
He
This
was
is
more
key.
forward.
Yeah.
It used to be that presidential candidates and senators, they would sort of dance around it. They didn't want to say that there was a
just said
list
it.
around abortion.
Yeah.
And Trump being Trump was basically like, no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And that brought home the evangelical base, which has now been consistently actually his strongest supporters. So taking away that motivating factor, that could depress the Republican base somewhat, who have been kept together through these sort of culture war issues. Mediating against that, I would say there's a whole other host of culture war issues that are equally sort of like salient and energizing for the Republican base right now that we saw play out in Virginia as one example. So I'm not really sure that it's going to have that much impact on them. On the other side, with the Democratic base and with the sort of new suburban coalition, if there was anyone who was going to be super energized by Roe versus Wade being overturned, it would be like suburban liberal women who may vote kind of back and forth. But this, since they have assumed now for decades that this was the law of the land and that these threats were not in danger, I could see it being a very motivating force in 2022 and potentially in 2024 as well. So I do think it shifts the political calculus in terms of who this is a motivation for. This is no longer going to be a really super effective motivator for the Republican base, and it may become a more effective motivator for the Democratic base. Overall, again, going back to kind of what we were saying in Georgia, I think 2022 is going to be a bloodbath for Democrats.
Yes.
I don't think whatever the court does on Roe is ultimately going to save them. But over the longer term landscape, I think it would probably be better for Republicans if Roberts left this thing hanging by a thread where you still had Roe technically in place, but states that's basically what we have right now. States effectively able to use all kinds of loopholes to basically ban abortion rights overall. And by the way, so in terms of what the actual impact of this would be, one analysis says that more than half of U.S. states, if Roe is overturned, would have no legal protections for abortion. So you'd have a sort of like, half the country you would still have these rights, and half the countries you won't. It would be left up to the states. So that's
I think in practice it just means that there'll be like 7 states in the South where abortions will just be legal everywhere else. I mean, like in terms
there's a lot more than that. There's at least 12 that have it automatically.
Auto triggers.
The auto trigger thing, where
there's the difference between like 1990 Tennessee, auto trigger law or North Carolina auto trigger law, and then like 2021 it actually gets overturned. Are they actually going to? I mean, state legislatures can flip all the time. So in practice, you're right. 12 states have the auto triggers. I know Texas definitely has one. In practice, I would say 20 years from now, if it gets overturned, I really don't see it staying more than like 7, 8 states. Well, again, I'm not saying like, look, if you live in Texas and all those places, it's going to be a matter to you. But for the vast majority of the country and the population, it's almost certainly going to remain legal.
One other thing that I will say here, I mean, listen, this is abortion like everything is also a class issue. If you're a rich woman, you're going to be able to get to do whatever you want. So you're talking about people who can't afford to travel to other states that ultimately will be impacted here by whatever happens. The other thing that liberals are concerned about, I honestly don't know if this has any merit or not, but other things that were settled, social cultural rights that were settled, things like Obergefell and marriage equality, things like the right birth control, because that was also a Supreme Court decision giving people the right to have birth control. There's question, okay, well, if we're saying, to hell with precedent, who cares about that? Does that then open the door to relitigating some of those other social cultural issues that we thought were settled? I don't know if it is or not.
I don't think so.
Do I think that could be an effective talking point for Democratic politicians trying to scare Northern Virginia women that they may not have their birth control? Yes, I do think that is potentially potent. And on Texas, one last thing on this, because you were saying, well, the Texas thing didn't really matter. I do think in California, I do think it mattered. I think part of why the polls swung significantly and Gavin Newsom actually outperformed, unusual for a Democrat, what the polls were saying. I do think it's because he could point to Texas and say, you don't want that to happen here. that was never going to happen in California, but it freaked people out enough for them to overlook the fact that they did not particularly love Gavin Newsom and get their butts to the poll to make sure that Larry Elder did not become governor of the state.
Very true. And if anything, that would show it's a good base motivator, which, like you said, if you want noble women to come out, which they didn't, well, they did, but not necessarily in the same levels or more in the Virginia election, this very much could do it. What you should take away from this is it's complicated in terms of how it plays out politically. It could not play out bad for Republicans in 2022, and it could also open the door for like some Todd Aiken bloodbath in 2024. That's right. Right? You know, you never know how this stuff is going to play out, and projecting it is really hard. Tried to give everybody all sides of this one, so I hope that was useful to everyone.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.
There is a crisis happening here, along the border of Belarus and Poland. Thousands of migrants trying to make it deeper into Europe had been trapped in makeshift camps in freezing temperatures for weeks, often without water, food, or medical attention.
Thousands of people caught in the middle of an intensifying geopolitical dispute,
stranded in freezing conditions. Human rights groups say that the harsh conditions have already killed some of the migrants.
Migrants coming to Europe usually make their way through countries that border the Mediterranean Sea. But earlier this year, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia saw a spike in irregular crossings along their landlocked borders. When you take a closer look, you'll notice these crossings are taking place along Belarus's entire border with the EU. And the reason this border is the new epicenter of Europe's migration crisis is one man, Europe's last dictator. In 2020, Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory in Belarus's presidential election, an election widely believed to be rigged.
Загубите первого президента, это будет начало вашего конца.
Backed by his main ally Russia, Lukashenko ruled for 4 prior terms that were also considered fraudulent. But this time, the response was different. After the results were announced, thousands of Belarusians took to the streets, despite the pandemic, to demand Lukashenko step down. Instead, he responded with a brutal crackdown and arrested more than 7,000 protesters. Hundreds were beaten and tortured. 4 people died. And his political opposition was forced to flee the country. Lukashenko's nickname, Europe's last dictator, became more fitting than ever. The EU responded with sanctions, marking the beginning of a dangerous struggle between the EU and Belarus.
The EU will impose shortly sanctions on a substantial number of individuals responsible for violence, repression, and election fraud.
Despite this first round of sanctions, Lukashenko continued to crush dissent. He used prisons across the country to hold hundreds of political prisoners and arrested 27,000 civilians. So the EU doubled down and imposed 2 more rounds of sanctions. But Lukashenko only got more aggressive. In May of 2021, Belarus intercepted a passenger plane as it flew over Belarus's airspace. After forcing it to land, Belarus officials arrested a prominent Belarusian opposition journalist. He was allegedly forced to confess to plotting riots on camera. As of today, he's still under house arrest. The EU countered with yet another round of sanctions. This time, Lukashenko manufactured a crisis at the border to get back at them. migrants hoping to get to Europe often make their way to these coastal areas, and then take a dangerous boat ride to European shores. It's an arduous journey that can take days. Many don't make it. But in the summer of 2021, a seemingly easier path opened up. Shortly after the fourth round of EU sanctions, Lukashenko announced he wouldn't be stopping migrants from heading to the EU. It was more than just a warning. Belarus hadn't seen a lot of Middle Eastern migrants come through here in the past. So the Lukashenko regime created new ways to lure them into the country. Belarus began offering tourist visas to thousands in the Middle East, especially in Iraq. Flights from Istanbul, Damascus, and Dubai on Belavia, Belarus's state-owned airline, more than doubled compared to the same time last year. Encouraged by Belarus's open borders, thousands of migrants from war-torn zones arrived in Minsk. Once on the ground, reports show Belarusian guards bust them to the border along Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. But the EU border wasn't open to them. All three countries declared a state of emergency at the border and put up barbed wire fences. Looking for an opening, thousands of migrants eventually ended up here, at this checkpoint on the border, where things escalated. Poland rushed thousands of troops to the border to push the migrants back. They used tear gas and water cannons to stop migrants from crossing. On the Belarusian side, border guards wouldn't let the migrants retreat. They forcibly held them and pushed them to try again. As many as 4,000 migrants got trapped in this violent cycle. They couldn't go back to their home countries and couldn't go to Minsk either. Those tourist visas were no longer available to them. The EU labeled this hybrid warfare, and in many ways, it is an act of aggression. Belarus trapped the migrants, but the EU also failed the migrants by ignoring its own legal code, which prohibits collective expulsions or pushbacks and guarantees minimum rights for persons apprehended or intercepted in connection with irregular border crossings. Contrary to the law, the migrants here were denied their rights and pushed away. And it's not the first time it's happened. In 2015, Syria, Iraq, and other Middle Eastern countries were deep in conflict, forcing many to flee for safety. Back then, the safest route into Europe went through Turkey. From there, migrants could cross into Greece by land or take short boat rides across. Hundreds of thousands of migrants came in this way. It was the largest migration wave ever recorded in a single year, and the EU wasn't prepared. So, in March of 2016, the EU made a deal with Turkey. Put simply, Turkey would hold back migrants and take back any who made it to Greece. In exchange, the EU would pay Turkey 6 billion euros. With this deal, the EU moved its external borders from here to here, essentially outsourcing its border security and legal responsibilities. Human rights groups warned the deal was reckless and illegal, and made migrants subject to human rights violations. Still, the deal went on to take effect, and migrant arrivals in Greece plummeted. The deal was so effective in stopping the flow of migrants, it soon took on a new geopolitical importance. Over the years, Turkey learned it could threaten to let migrants in exchange for more funds from the EU. But it's not just Turkey. Europe has paid all these countries to keep migrants from its borders. You'll notice they form a buffer around Europe that stretches from Turkey to Morocco. In many of these places, migrants are subject to abuse and violence, including being pushed back to the conflict areas they are trying to escape. But Europe usually gets away with pushing back migrants because it happens here, far away and out of sight. And this gives all these countries leverage and incentive to use migrants as pawns. And that's exactly what Lukashenko is doing in Belarus, to try and get the EU to drop its sanctions. But it doesn't seem to be working.
And we agreed to expand the scope of the sanctions regime on Belarus. The road to the European Union does not lead via Belarus.
After weeks of escalation, the EU adopted yet another round of sanctions and pressured airlines to cut off major air routes from the Middle East to Minsk. Belarus has finally admitted to moving migrants to the border with Poland and has brought the migrants from the cold camps to nearby warehouses for now. But Lukashenko hasn't fully backed down yet. In fact, he's still encouraging migrants to cross into the EU.
Если вы захотите идти в западном направлении, мы не будем вас душить, хватать и избивать. Это ваша воля. Пройдете — идите.
And that's because as long as the EU continues to incentivize countries to keep migrants away from its borders, leaders like Lukashenko will find ways to exploit them.
Ford decided to stop making cars in India in 2021 and mostly retreated from the country after years of trying to make it work.
Ford has been in a position where they've been steadily losing market share in India. If you look back about a decade ago, they had about 3% market share of all new auto sales in India. As of last year, they were down to 1.7%.
In a statement sent to CNBC, Ford said that it is not leaving India. It will expand its Ford Business Solutions team, which manages sales to commercial customers and employs about 11,000 people in the country. Nevertheless, as part of its restructuring efforts, Ford will stop assembling vehicles in Sanand, India by the fourth quarter of 2021. It will also stop making cars and engines in Chennai by the second quarter of 2022. Over the last 20 years, Ford has lost more than $2 billion in its India business. That is in addition to the $0.8 billion asset write-down it did in India in 2019. After investing significantly in India for many years with unacceptable returns, we have taken difficult but necessary actions, the company told CNBC. The Blue Oval is not the only automaker to pull out of India, and India is not the only country Ford and its Detroit-based American rival General Motors have retreated from. Both Ford and GM have pulled back on international operations in recent years. GM sold its European business, pulled out of India, and several other countries around the world. These moves signify a shift in strategy for Ford and GM, the two largest American automakers in terms of sales. They used to focus on increasing vehicle volumes and on growing their presence around the world. Now they want to focus more on being profitable, even if it means being smaller. And the place where they are most likely to achieve that is right at home, in North America. When India began opening its economy in the early 1990s, it seemed to promise a lot of opportunity. India is the world's second most populous country, with